for most people, their experience has been ChatGPT or Claude, which is a language-based model, and then a software that they've probably used for 15 or 20 years with ChatGPT on top of it.
Welcome to It's About Data. Our guest in episode 86 is Stephen Messer, co-founder of Collective Eye.
Welcome to another session, of It's About Data. And this session really kind of reminds me of why I'm in this business and why we're doing this podcast. I mean, does the world need another podcast? What I realized, is that what I really enjoy most about the business that we're in is the conversations. And some of the most stimulating conversations have come from our guest today, our special guest today, and also a very good friend, Stephen Messer. You are co-founder, amongst other things, you are co-founder of Collective Eye. But also more of the point. Now, I'll ask you to explain a little more of your background, so the audience will get not just where you're coming from, but you've been a successful, two-time entrepreneur that with early roots in the dot-com era, and you came out of it with even through all the implosion, with a great exit, and now you've been going for the last 10 or 15 years with another organization, with another company, another that you've started up that has a very unique position in B2B commerce. So, Stephen, I'm going to bastardize this. Can you tell us a little more about your background?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. One, thank you, Tony, and Matt. Thank you for having me here today. And I'm excited to get to know your audience and share some interesting insights. I'll give a little background. So in 1996, my sister and I, along with two other co-founders, started Linkshare. Linkshare became the world's largest affiliate marketing company, which is a big deal because at that time, most people were trying to make money on the internet by buying advertising, and we were pay per performance. No one knew what that was when we started the business. When we left it, it enabled today the world you see around you. Every influencer, every publisher, every player out there is out there really just trying to earn money with their audience and serve their audience, and they can do it without having to go build an ad network or other ways of doing it. And for advertisers, it became a really effective way for them to reach larger audiences they couldn't have done before. We sold that business in 2006 to Rakuten for about $500 million. It was a good exit, and today it exists as Rakuten Media. And Hiroshi Mikitani is a great founder, has done a great job building that business and continues to grow. Our joint venture partners before we sold were Mitsui, and so we had a big business in Japan. It just was a nice matchup. But Tony, you're right. We left that. We sold that business. I helped. Was first check into Spire Global, which is a satellite company that does cube satellites. We used to do ship tracking. We just sold that business. But we do weather, we do space services, we do a whole bunch of other great stuff. And that business is now a New York Stock Exchange traded company, which I highly recommend people look at. It's a great business. And then we started Collective Eye about 10 years ago, which is just short for collective intelligence. Think of it as what OpenAI is for words, we are for predicting economic outcomes. So companies will use us to understand their go-to-market. They'll use us to do things like anticipatory shipping, anticipatory hiring and firing. Really, they're using the live stream of how their business is changing and predicting what that means for their tomorrow as a way to really more efficiently operate their business. And that becomes a big deal when you want to do things like agentic, which I know we're going to talk about today.
Right. And the common thread I see through your background, you and your colleagues, of course, and your sister, is that it's all about connections.
Yeah.
And that really kind of segs into the topic I want to talk about, right now, which is, we had a great conversation a couple months ago over lunch, and I said, my God, we've got to get this out there on the air, which is talking about how you envisioned how agents would. I mean, we were talking about how agents would make software or make the enterprise. You're talking about how it remakes the internet,
Yeah.
and I may be bastardizing this, but to me, it sounded like kind of like a new operating system that would provide a new degree of security. So let me. Why don't you take it from there and tell us what your vision was, what you're talking about?
Look, I think for me to set the groundwork, I want to step back from the way I think a lot of people are thinking about AI today, which is
Right.
for most people, their experience has been ChatGPT or Claude, which is a language-based model, and then a software that they've probably used for 15 or 20 years with ChatGPT on top of it.
Totally fair.
And that's going to cloud the way you see the entire agentic world. You're going to
Mhm.
think of it as like an add-on to the current world that you work in. And I would argue that world goes away pretty fast.
Hmm.
So if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to keep using this workflow tool and I'm just going to layer in a little bit of ChatGPT or a little bit of agentic, I think you missed the larger world of how agents can change the entire way you operate as a business, personally, et cetera. And so for this conversation, I want to imagine a world where we're just focused on first principles about what is it that agents are going to do for you?
Mhm.
And then where would you have most of those things changing the way you operate? And I think that will help think about a world that feels more natural.
Mhm.
And I might start with a consumer one, even though we don't do consumer, we focus on B2B, but
Right.
I'm trying to find something that would bring this example to home. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure. I
Yeah.
mean, well, think of the first example that and you know that comes to mind, and then you can translate it to a business or
Yeah.
to a consumer context.
Well, I'll take the one that probably is an AI tool that people have used the longest. That's not going to have like a Chat GPT edition, but just probably when they're used to, like Google Maps or Waze.
Right.
So you're driving in your car and you need to get gas. Okay, that's fine. What if you, as you're driving, you had an agent that just went ahead and figured out which gas station had the best price,
Mhm.
had an empty slot open, so
Mhm.
that when you arrived, you weren't waiting online and essentially prepaid for it before you got there so you could just pump your gas and get back on the highway faster.
Mhm.
Okay, simple idea. What would an agent need to do that? Well, it already knows where you are, right? Because you already have it on your phone.
Mhm.
It already knows your credit card because you probably installed Apple Pay or Google Pay or one of the ones you already have. It already has the route you're going because it knows the address and destination you're trying to go. So maybe it doesn't know about the gas that you need. That's probably the one place where you
Mhm.
can imagine a Bluetooth to your car could provide Google Maps that one additional piece of information.
Mhm.
And then as you're driving, it tells you the best place to stop on your journey to get gas.
You
Okay,
know,
that's a relatively simple agent model.
to
No
some
workflow
extent,
needed.
that's already happening in the electric vehicle world today, in terms of that, because basically today, unlike gas stations, which you can take for granted, it's like, like it's still kind of a guessing game in terms of where the next charging station is, and where and actually in the electric vehicle world, they've already adopted some of what you're talking about. Maybe not with the agents, but they've adopted some of that.
In fact, when you go into Tesla, you can see how many stalls are open. You can see how
Right.
far it is on your
Mhm.
journey. It tells you where you should operate to, it tries to find or maximize your distance. And if you're
Mhm.
going to do round trip, it'll tell you the furthest station so you know that you can
Right.
charge once instead of twice. Yeah, no, this is exactly my point of imagine these things all sort of just being blended into the
Mhm.
decisions you're making. And the reason why I use Google Maps is you're already used to it guiding you to the route it should
Mhm.
go.
Mhm.
Adding in a stop, whether it be to get food, to get fuel, to pick up your groceries before you get home. These are things that could just be based on multiple decisions: best price, closest distance, preferred shopping locations or venues, points that you get. An agent can handle all of that for you. And I'd like this example because people who are used to Uber know they don't have to use their credit card anymore when they get out of a car. They know that it'll tell them where to arrive and where to go. In other words, this one example of adding an agent is such a logical progression when you're using a product where AI is already giving you the guidance of how to optimize it. And that's why I gave that example as opposed to, for example, your SaaS product with ChatGPT, where that may feel like a much bigger leap because there you're used to filling out workflows. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to pick the A, B, or C. I need to follow this up. And then it's doing stuff. There, it's much harder to imagine an agent just making these decisions and optimizing for your life in the way you think. But in the example of Waze, it was a logical conclusion where,
Right.
yeah, it takes one less thing, it optimizes my journey in one minor tweak, but dramatically beneficial way.
Hmm.
How do we deal
And
with
it
the
seems
security
obvious.
implications of this? That would be my big question. So I think even if you go back to smartphones and Apple Pay when that first came out, I think a lot of what people were nervous about is giving their credit card to another tool that could potentially leak that sensitive data or allow fraud to happen. And with agents, people are much more nervous because, like, hold on, this is a non-deterministic system. Now all of a sudden, maybe the agent leaks my credit card information. How do we deal with that and reassure both consumers and businesses that they're going to be okay?
Yeah, no, look, this is a core. I think there's a few things that you have to think about. There's actual security layer, and I think that gets knocked out. The one thing I know is that whenever there's a pain point that holds back the spending of dollars,
Yeah.
there's a company that fills it. So I'm okay with
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
Unless you're worried about RSA and quantum, which is a whole different layer.
Right. Right.
We're thinking that gets solved, and I think that gets solved pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I think secondly, Americans in particular versus Europeans and other players have an advantage, which is unless you're using a debit card, you have a protection that has always been there,
Mhm.
which is the credit card companies run the biggest risk. And I think that makes Americans more comfortable taking risks earlier,
Right.
or at least enough of a percentage that talk about how that works really well. But I
Mhm.
think you're right. I think we're going to find that there are different personas that people want. There are the persona where they want man in the middle. This is where your Google Maps or Waze example will come back and say, you need to get fuel. There's a mobile, which is your favorite with the best price. Do you want me to reroute you?
Mhm.
And the user will have to say yes and authorize the transaction.
Got it. Okay.
Right.
I think that for the Apple type people who want comfort and security will probably rely on that. I think a larger number of people will say, no, just go ahead.
Right. Right.
Don't do it again.
What's interesting here is that a lot of what you're talking about, if we would have had this conversation like a year or two ago, as I said, like, well, this is very futuristic. Look at what happened, what came out, from Google I/O this week.
Yeah.
That Gemini is gradually getting all over Google's products down to the search bar, and it's not a big concept leap, especially with Google basically launching its own sort of agentic life cycle tools. That it's the next it's a very logical next step. They're basically you know uh, embedding Gemini in search. So that's the first major expansion there, one step at a time. Next logical step would be agents.
I think it's not only a logical step, I think it's going to be a restriction. It's going to hold back the use of these products
Talk to
Mhm.
me.
because right now, when you look at these products, it requires you to get on, it requires you to type, it
Right,
requires you to give context, it requires you to be good at prompting, it requires so much stuff that I really don't
right,
think you should use. And the reason why I gave that consumer example is because of think about all the context that Google Maps or Waze has because it's in your car, it's traveling with you, it knows how fast you're driving, it knows probably your car type, it knows
right.
where you're going to, it knows so it has enough context to do things for you. And I think this is where agents need to be a part of the sort of the day-to-day of your life because the more context it has, the better it's able to make good decisions for you without so much input. And I think that a lot of the AI we see today is that man in the middle that
Hmm.
is painful. We want the AI to do the things that makes our lives easier, right? I don't want to have to tell people to follow up and do things all the time. If you've ever had to work with someone where they keep coming in saying, did you want me to do that thing? Okay, well, that's really frustrating. And I think it becomes critical. Now, by the way, Matt, to your point, I did forget one thing, which you may not realize. I personally believe that in the same way parents sometimes give their children a credit card that's in the kids' names,
Yes.
but that they monitor and can have spending
Yeah.
restrictions on. I
Mm.
believe that's likely to happen. Not only will we give a text message, not only will we give a phone number, but we'll give credit cards to our agents, and they'll have rules around what they can spend. I think part of the challenge today is we're giving things like OpenAI and Claude a use of our credit card with an auto replenishment feature that essentially is like saying, go do what you want. Now, if you were to
Right.
add on top of that, there it's behaving like me, not an authorized user of my account, but me. And that means I can't separate the decisions that are being made to say, does this fit a proper pattern? And we know from fraud detection that the companies that we work with have have pattern detection built in. I could put in a restriction around observing patterns to see if it goes crazy on its own, or if it's only doing things agent to agent, not agent to person or agent. Like I may restrict the types of authorization I let it do so that I can avoid bad behavior. And I might also then be able to add to that credit card a watch list of accounts or other places where agents are fraudulent or doing things and block them the same way we block websites that are known to be spoofers or fake, et cetera. We keep now centralized locations of places that do bad behavior, and we can actually block that from our firewalls. And so there's a lot of things that I think that opens the doors that we can't do with people today. But with agents, we will. That'll actually make it even more secure than what we would have seen with people making decisions on their own.
Yeah, I mean, I've long been an advocate of the idea that, frankly, corporate enterprise IT departments are way behind the curve. If you look at their internal standards, like SOC 2, the way they define SOC 2, they're not nearly active enough. And so I'm a big fan of the idea that you want an active agentic process to monitor not only other agents, but just stuff that humans are doing. Okay, one last question here. I'm going to rewind to two big tech developments. This first is Siri. Siri came out on the iPhone. Everyone was very excited. And then, frankly, it kind of fizzled. You know, people were
Yeah.
using it to send text messages, voice to text, whatever. But the promise of like Siri being able to be an actual agent and do things for you just kind of died. And then we had another phase of it, right? So Amazon Alexa, these Alexa voice apps came out. Everyone got so excited. There were whole classes of incubators that focused on voice apps. And then a few years later, that fizzled too. So, how do we prevent the same fizzling process from happening with this generation of agents that happened with past voice apps that everyone got excited about?
I mean, look, the modern version of that might be the hype around granola, which seems to be the most crazed tool I've ever seen. Where the amount of money that they're spending to hype that puppy up, which you can almost see the hype and the crash curve on that product
Right.
already. Because let me get this straight: a CEO is recording everything they say every day. I think I know of a litigation
Oh
group
gosh,
in every law firm that has just literally subpoenaed granola perpetually to sue every company in the world. I mean, it's like the craziest thing
man.
I've ever heard. And I think it's one of these things where I think voice, whether it be from Star Trek or whatever it is, voice
Yeah.
tends to be the thing that captures the attention of people who want to pretend to be AI. And I think Siri
Mm-hmm.
pretended to be AI.
Yes.
I think Alexa pretended to be AI.
Mm-hmm.
It's the magic sprinkle you do when you don't really have something that it's doing for you. That's why I use granola as an example. Sure, recordings are great, but a lot of the recording tools that have been out there have been underwhelming.
Mhm.
I'm in sales. There's conversational intelligence. All I know is my mother taught me very early on: don't listen to what people say, watch what they do. And
Mm,
yet they built an industry around that. There was an industry that was out there that would say that they could detect when people were lying, which turned out to be completely wrong, and was used to hire or not hire people. That has come out and been proven to be not only bad but inaccurate. So I think voice tends to be that. And it's funny because when I watched Mira Murati's thinking machines come out, the first thing they came out with was a conversational AI enhancement to that. Now,
mhm.
that's not me beating up on voice. I do think voice has a role, but if you think about what we learned during the pandemic is when people shut their camera off and you're having a voice conversation, there is probably no greater insult that you can do on a conference call than shutting off your camera, right? If I were to do that right now, your audience is going to feel a major lack of communication. And that's because voice tends to be tied to a bigger understanding of
Right.
communicating information.
Mhm.
So I do believe when we see the biped robots that are out there, there's a reason why you're going to see a iPad face there because that becomes a part of how
Right.
we communicate.
Right.
Communicating to a device, whether it be through for an agent or not, can be useful if it's short. I'm going to guess that even though
Mhm.
you've had Claude and ChatGPT on your phone, when you go and sit at your computer, you don't turn voice on to write prompts. For whatever reason, we've been trained this way. Now, that may
Right,
not
right.
be the newer generation. If you're somewhere
True.
between the ages of 10 and 20, you may actually feel more aligned with it. And in fact, if you look at the study
Right.
voice agents, when people are trying to build companions or and all the different AI companions, they are doing it through voice. But
Mhm.
I do question whether, other than short prompts, people are ready truly to do voice. I think more likely what will happen is you'll have an agent that you create, or the products you use will build agents into them for you and
Mhm.
ask you, did you want me to refine anything? So it's more short discussions. I don't like mobile. Can we not do mobile anymore? Or I prefer not to get an airline on Delta. I prefer JetBlue if it's available. Okay, these are preference decisions that they're going to run by you, or they're going to give you options and you're going to give feedback of the three options that you gave me, I prefer to go to Marriott. And it might say, oh, it seems like you like Marriott because the last three times you did it. Do you want me to keep Marriott as a priority? Sure. Those are short, bursty things.
Mhm.
And I say this because if you've ever worked with an executive assistant, that's how you work with the executive assistant.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. They
Right.
just take
And
responsibility for things. You give them instructions, and then they understand to extend those instructions into the future.
Right,
and the
right.
lock
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
the lock in for the app becomes how well it gets to know you.
Yeah.
Mhm. Right, right.
And so, because I think you'll find agentic can make switching costs easy. For example, I would look and say, when OpenAI won the Department of War's contract, and people were so pissed off, they switched in mass to Claude.
Mhm.
That was not good for Claude. What that showed was there was zero switching cost amongst any LLM.
Mhm.
And the first time that Claude loses that popularity contest, which they always will,
Right.
right? Somebody will
Everybody
always
will.
be upset
Everybody
with
always will.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It meant that people could vote with their wallet to the span of what was 20 billion in the span of a week, which meant
Yeah.
there was zero lock-in at all. Nobody cares. And you see it today happening with Claude Code, where a lot of people are switching to Codex because they were pretty pissed off with Opus 4.7 and the
Mhm.
three prior weeks when they were really degrading the quality of results so that they could buy enough compute to get everyone's new money. And all of a sudden, Codex was much better and it felt
Mhm.
good. Or when Claude shut off access to OpenClaw, people were pissed. They
Mhm.
were like, I can tell you, I canceled my subscription right away. So what it meant was there's no switching cost. And I think what
Right.
you're going to find is the only real lock-in for agentic is how it learns your preferences quickly.
Mhm. Right.
And so I think you're going to find that the work will be, how do we figure out how to make you feel good so that my results feel better to you than a new agent that might pop
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. It's kind of like where you feel at home. And, we
Yeah.
over the last 20 years, we've kind of, put things in, put fixtures into our taste. It makes it harder to leave. Well, the thing is, well, Stephen, we could go on at least for another hour on this. It's a fascinating
Easy.
conversation. And in terms of just where this agentic, transformation, or transition will take us, it's, definitely fodder for, be great to have this conversation again next year, given the fact that if we had this conversation last year, we would have thought this is just wildly futuristic. Stephen, thanks very much for joining us.
You guys, thank you for having me here.
Thank you.